5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here. Obviously, we're very concerned about this, as I'm sure you've gathered from the questions that have been asked here today. Earlier in our first panel, I made it clear, I think the tailpipe ruling and proposal is one of the most egregious, irresponsible proposals that I've seen the federal government do. I mean, it's just ridiculous that we are mandating and picking winners and losers like this and trying to doing away with internal combustible engines. But nevertheless, I wanted to ask you, Mr. Thompson, I read your testimony, and in your testimony, you characterized the tailpipe emission standard for light and medium-duty vehicles and the California waiver as mandating a single technology, EVs, and banning the sale of new internal combustion engine vehicles. And I couldn't agree with you more. My question is this: can you explain how the EPA regulations can be considered a mandate?
Well, look, I couldn't help but think the emperor has no clothes when you hear EPA say this is not a mandate. Look at the president's executive order where he wanted to go with this. Look at the press releases around this. Look at the executive statements around the rule, and it's all about being about EVs and EV mandates. And they say that the only way the dealers the manufacturers can comply is selling 70% electric vehicles. That's a mandate under any reasonable definition.
Also in your testimony, you mentioned that refiners make long-term investment decisions. And, I was in business for 32 years, and I know that I did that as well. My business decisions were based on a lot of what was going on in the economy, what was going on in my profession, and certainly that's what's happening here. And I go back to the State of the Union address where this president had the audacity to stand up before a joint session of Congress and say that the reason gasoline prices were so high is because the petroleum companies weren't investing in infrastructure and in refineries. And then in the next breath said, oh, by the way, we're not going to need fossil fuels in the next 10 years. Unbelievable. But I ask you this because even if these are simple proposals, these tailpipe emission proposals, even they're simple, what's the impact of an EPA issuing such excessive regulation? What would it have on business?
It's a massive impact, and as to any commentary that we haven't invested, I'll tell you that our industry has invested over $100 billion in the last couple decades to reduce our emissions and to keep our plants up and running so we could supply the fuel that gets people to work and to church and everywhere else we need to go. We make tremendous investments, but we're capital intensive, Congressman, as you just said. And so if you're at a refinery right now trying to decide whether you're going to invest a couple $1 billion to keep your plants up and running, these rules mean a lot. These rules mean a lot.
So do you think that these rule proposals and California's waiver, that they have a chilling effect on the investment in the energy sector?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
Makes perfect business sense to me. One last question, Mr. Thompson. The Fuels Institute report indicated that battery EVs have a higher life cycle, greenhouse gas emissions footprint than internal combustion engines and hybrid vehicles. And that's one thing that bothers me. Hybrid vehicles seem to be working well, and yet it's all or none. It's got to be all EV or nothing at all, whereas the hybrids seem to accomplish even more. And you would think that if we were being reasonable, that we would try to ease into this, maybe, encourage more hybrids and then get to EVs if that's the ultimate decision. But it doesn't. This rush to green that we're experiencing with this administration just is appalling to me. But if the Biden administration truly wanted to decrease transportation-related emissions, should the tailpipe emission standard for light and medium-duty vehicles include hybrids?
Absolutely. It should include all options, and it should do a life cycle analysis, and that way, and they should follow the law, importantly, and then let the standards fall where they may. Listen, nothing we've said today is any way suggesting there should be a rollback or we should not be pressing for fuel efficiency improvements. But we ought to do it the way this body, Congress, told EPA to do it, and we ought to leave all options. It's crazy to take hybrids off the table, crazy.
Good. Well, again, thank all of you for being here, and this is extremely important to this. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this very educational and important hearing, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.